Hello, this is Music Tech Help Guy, and welcome to my brand new video tutorial series on Logic Pro 10. After using Logic 10 for a few months, I found that I really liked it, even more than I liked 9, and I decided to just make a full video tutorial series from beginner level things like what we're going to do today, just getting started in Logic, all the way up to more advanced features like sampling and drum replacing and things like that. So I hope to do about 1 to 2 videos every week, and within a year I'll have a complete video series in Logic. So after we open up the software, we'll get the startup window here, and we're just going to create a new empty project. And then the arrange window will load, and then shortly after that, this is the new tracks dialog. So for this video, we're going to be using software instruments and audio tracks. So let's just click on audio to create a new audio track and make sure our input is set to input 1. That's where we're going to plug our mic or instrument into right now. And down here you can check your audio interface. Mine's an Alessi interface, but this could be anything like an M-Box or something similar. And then down here, if you want to, you can actually create multiple tracks. So if I wanted to create 2 audio tracks, I just type in 2 here, but we're just going to stick to 1 for now. So click create. And you'll see on the left side, we've created our first audio track. Now our audio track header over here has a few options on it. We have mute, solo, record, input monitoring, we have volume control, and a pan control. We'll get to these later, but for now, let's just double click where it says audio 1, and let's rename this track guitar, because, well, I'm going to record guitar. Another thing you can do is you can zoom your track header to make it larger or smaller. So you basically just hover over the bottom of the track and then pull down or pull up. You can also hover over the right side and pull right or left to make it wider or narrower. So earlier I said that we'd also be using software instrument tracks, which are MIDI tracks, which allow us to play software synthesizers. So let's create a new track by clicking on the plus sign here. And this will open up the new tracks dialog again. And then what we'll do is we'll choose software instrument. Now, again, software instruments are MIDI-enabled tracks. What they do is they allow you to put a software synthesizer or sampler on the track, and then you can control that instrument with a MIDI controller, like a MIDI keyboard. So after we create our track here, let's go ahead and zoom it, just like we did with the audio track. And on this software instrument, I'm going to create an electric bass. So I'm just going to go ahead and rename this bass guitar for now. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my guitar track because that's the first instrument or the first track we're going to record on. But before we do that, we need to set up our audio interface for recording, properly for recording. So the way we do this is go up to Logic Pro 10, go down to Preferences, and then go to Audio. Now, the audio preferences dialog lets you choose what input and output device you're using. So right now, mine says Alessi Firewire, so I'm using it as an input, and I'm also using it as an output. So in order to hear my session, I'm going to have to plug my speakers or my headphones into the Alessi Firewire interface. Another thing we can do is we can choose built-in inputs and outputs. This allows you to monitor through your computer's built-in output, so you can just plug your headphones into your computer, or you can plug your microphone directly into your computer's built-in input. And some Macs actually come with built-in microphones that you could choose here as well. So I'm going to set mine back to Alessi Firewire. And then make sure that your buffer size is set to like 32 or 64, to like a low value. And essentially what I/O buffer is it's the amount of information that Logic in your computer will process at once. And if this is too high, it'll actually cause latency issues, which will cause a noticeable lag in your signal. So we'll come back to I/O buffer a little bit later in another video. So just set it to 32, hit apply changes, and after that loads, you can just close out your preferences window and we're ready to start recording. So I'm going to record guitar on this audio track here, and in order to do that, I have to make sure that the input that the guitar is plugged into on my interface matches up with the input on the track. So the way you do this is you select the track, and then you go down to the channel strip associated with that track, and you'll see the input section here that says we're receiving signal from input 1. So I just have to make sure that my guitar is plugged into input 1 on my interface. Then I'll just click on the input monitoring button on my track and play a few notes on my guitar. All right, so we're getting signal from the guitar, but it's kind of bland. So let's use a channel strip setting to enhance the sound of the guitar, make it sound like an amped guitar. So what you do is you click on the track, go back to the channel strip here, and find your channel strip setting tab here. And you click on that. And in Logic 9, typically you'd see just a whole list of channel strip setting presets here. But in Logic 10, you have to go to Legacy, Logic, and then find your Logic channel strip settings. So I'm going to go to Electric Guitar, and then I'll go down to Distort, and then Distort Dry. And the one I'm looking for is Dangerous Distort. And so it loads up a whole set of plugins that enhance the sound of the guitar. So let's try that out. All right, so that worked out fine. I'm going to turn off input monitoring and go down to the channel strip here for just a moment. There's a bunch of plugins here that we can mess with if we wanted to. One in particular I want you to look at is the tuner. And the tuner is its own plugin, but it comes with a lot of the guitar channel strip settings, and it just lets you tune your input signal. All right, so you can use the tuner to check to see that your instrument's in tune, and I know my guitar's in tune, so I don't really need it. So I'm just going to turn that off. And on my guitar track, I'm going to turn off input monitoring and then turn on ARM for recording. And what ARM for recording does is it lets that track be recorded onto. So the key command to record in Logic is just the R button on your keyboard. I should have mentioned before that spacebar plays and stops your session as well. Now, I didn't record anything there because it was a little too fast. I want to make it a little slower. So I'm just going to hit Command-Z to get rid of that recording. And then up at the top of the window here, you'll see that the BPM, the tempo, is set to 120 beats per minute. I'm going to change that to 100, just to go a little bit slower. And then what you can do is you can hit the return key to set your playhead back to the beginning. And let's try that again. All right, so that worked fine. As I mentioned before, this white line here is called the playhead, and what you can do is you can grab it and you can move it around and you can put it wherever you want, and when you press spacebar to play, it'll start from that point. And then, as I said before, you can hit return to go back to the beginning. And another thing you can do is you can simply click on the ruler up here, and it will put the playhead right at that point in the ruler. So there you go. All right, so now that we got the guitar down, we are ready to record a software instrument. And what we're going to do is we're going to record a bass guitar. We're going to find a software bass guitar. But first, let's save. Let's do a save as. File, save as. The problem is if we don't save, well, the entire Logic session is running off of RAM, which can cause some issues. So by default, what it does is it puts it tries to direct your session to admin, music, Logic. There's a Logic folder in there, but I'm going to save mine to the desktop instead. So I'm just going to click desktop, give it a name. I guess I'll just call it Logic Project 1. And then down here where it says organize my project as a, you can say package or folder. Folder creates a folder with other folders inside of it with all of your source files, and package makes your entire session one file. So I actually prefer the folder way. You can also say what do you want to include with your project, and for now we'll just say audio files. We'll talk about some of these other things later. Okay, now that we've saved, we are ready to assign a software instrument to our bass guitar here. So you just click on it, and as long as it's armed, you'll be able to hear the instrument that's on it. So since we're not recording guitar anymore, let's unarm the guitar. Let's also pull down the volume on the guitar so it doesn't bury the bass guitar when I try to record it. So just like with the audio track, I can assign a channel strip to my software instrument track here, and it'll assign a bunch of plugins as well as a software synthesizer. So what you do is you just make sure you select the track, go to the setting tab again, and just like we did before, go down to Legacy and then to Logic, and we'll see a whole list of different instrument presets. And I'm going to use one called Session Bass. And after the instrument loads, as long as the track is armed, you can play a few notes on your MIDI controller, and you should be able to hear what the instrument sounds like. All right, so I'm just going to hit R to record just a basic quarter note bass line. All right, so we recorded a MIDI region there with our bass, and you can tell it's MIDI because there's dashes and dots for notes, individual notes, as opposed to a waveform, which you'd see on an audio track. So with MIDI, it's just like musical control values stored in a clip. One thing you might have noticed during the recording is that my stereo output was clipping here by 0.7 dB. So to prevent that digital overload, what we can do is just pull the volume down on some of our tracks to give us a little more headroom. One great thing about MIDI tracks is that we can quantize them, which means you can correct their musical timings. So in order to do that, we go up here to this area. It's called the inspector. Actually, this whole column here is called the inspector. And you can hide it or show it right here. Or you can hit I on your keyboard. We'll also do the same thing. And the parameter we're looking for is this quantize parameter. Right now it says off. And when it says off, it means that the notes have not been quantized to a grid. So what you can do here is choose a musical grid value like a quarter note, eighth note, 16th note, and whatnot. I'm going to choose a quarter note because that's what I played. And what it does is it snaps every note in that region to the nearest quarter note in this case. So I'm just going to free up some room here for some more tracks. And one thing I want to add to this are some drums. And one way we can do that is with Logic's Apple Loop browser. And it comes with about 30 gigabytes of additional downloadable content. And a good chunk of those are loops. So you come up to the upper right corner here, click on Apple Loops, and you'll see your loop browser here with a list of all the loops that you can pick from. There's also some search parameters up here where you can narrow down what you're looking for. So I'm going to narrow down my search by just looking for drums, and then you can come down to the bottom here and you can scroll through the list and look for a whole bunch of different loops. And when you find one you like, you can actually just click on it and it will play for you. And then you can just click again to stop the playback of the loop. So since I like that one, all you have to do is drag and drop it out into your arrange area and just put it below your lowest track, and it'll automatically make a new track for it. So let's just increase the size of the track header, and then let's also get rid of the loop browser. And one thing you can do is if you hover your mouse over the upper right corner of a loop, you'll get this little loop icon, and it allows you to loop the loop, basically. So you just click and drag to the right, and you can make as many copies of the loop as you want. Apple Loops will actually conform to the tempo of your project. So let's see what this sounds like. All All right, that works. I'm just going to go ahead and pull the guitar down just a hair and pull the bass up a little bit just so they sit a little better with the drums. Okay, so earlier I showed you how you can create a new track by just going up to the plus sign here and choosing the type of track you want. Another quick way to do it is to click on a track that matches the type of track you want to create, and then just double click at the very bottom of the track headers, and it'll actually create a new track of that same type. So for our last track here, I want to create sort of like a synthesizer sound, like a synth lead or like a synth pad or something. So let's go up to our channel strip settings, go back to Legacy, Logic. I'm going to go to synthesizers, and then go up to synth leads, and what I'm going to use is called the classic trance lead. The classic trance lead is actually a monophonic synth, so you can only hear one note at a time. All right, so that's fine. I could go ahead and just play every note I want individually in the recording, just like we did with the bass guitar, but instead I'm going to take advantage of one of the new features in Logic 10, and that new feature is the MIDI effects insert on the software instrument channel strips. And what this does is it allows you to create various different MIDI effects. One in particular that I'm going to use is the Arpeggiator. Now, the Arpeggiator allows you to just hold a chord on your MIDI controller, and then it automatically arpeggiates that chord for you. So for this, I'm just going to use one of the presets up here, and the preset I'm going to use is called Classic Cycle 01. All right, so that sounds fine. I think I'm going to use that. And once you're done with it, you can just close out that plugin window. And what I'm going to do is record some chords with the arpeggiator behind my pre-existing material. But before I do that, I want to show you how to zoom, because I want to be able to optimize what I'm seeing. So one way you can do this is if you click on the background and then just hit Z, it'll auto-zoom everything to fit the window, so everything is a lot bigger now. The other way you can do it is there's two zoom controls up here in the upper right corner. There's a vertical zoom, and then just to the right of that is our horizontal zoom. So you can adjust everything so it's a little bigger and not crammed into one little spot. So now that I can see everything, I'm just going to go ahead and hit R and record my arpeggiated synth. All right, that works just fine. What I'm going to do next is actually pull the classic trance instrument, its volume down just a little bit. It's a bit loud, so I'll pull that down a bit. And then the other thing we can do is, just like with the bass guitar track, we can quantize it to the grid. So for this one, I'm going to use a 1-1 note, which is the same thing as a whole note, since all I played were whole note chords. After you're done with your project, you might want to render your whole project into a single file, into like a WAV file or MP3, something you can take with you, put on a CD, or put on an MP3 player. The way we do that is called bouncing. So to bounce is essentially to create a mix down of everything that we have. So to do this, you have to create a bounce range. So we're basically designating a boundary of where we want to bounce from and where we want to bounce to. So the way this is done is up here in the upper left corner, you'll see that measures 1 through 4 are kind of grayed out looking. And the reason why is this is actually the locators here. If you click on it, it turns yellow. You can grab it and you can set a left and right boundary for your bounce. Another function of the locators is called cycle mode. And when they're yellow like this, you can essentially loop everything that's within that range. And so if I were to press play right now, I'd just hear what's in between that range, and it would continuously loop itself until I stop the playback. So after we select our bounce boundary, you go down to File, Bounce, and then we go to Project or Section, and then you can memorize the key command, Command B. So we choose that. And this brings up the bounce dialog. We're going to stick with the PCM type file, which is essentially a WAV, AIF, or CAF file. And these other options, don't worry about them for now. We'll come back to these in a later video. Another option we can change is whether or not we want a real-time or offline bounce. What a real-time bounce does is it bounces during playback. It's more accurate, but takes the length of the file to bounce. So I recommend doing that for like final mixes. We're going to do an offline bounce, which is a lot quicker, but is not as accurate. So here it tells us we have to name our bounce, and by default it creates a bounces folder within your Logic project. So we'll save it there, and I'll just call this Simple Rock Song. So now that the bounce is done, I'm just going to hit Command S one more time to save, and then I'm going to go and quit Logic, and you can also do this with the key command, Command Q. So we no longer need Logic open. Let's go find our Logic project folder we created earlier. Here it is. Inside there is a bounces folder that it automatically created for us, and inside there is our WAV file that we just bounced. So I'm just going to click on that file and hit spacebar to see if it sounds all right. All right, so there we go. We were able to create our very first song from scratch with very little knowledge about the software. So I hope you enjoyed the video, I hope you learned something, and I hope it was easy to follow. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I'm going to continue to try to do these weekly until I basically run out of material to work with. So again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.